Hi, everyone. I am Michael Morella, Managing Editor of Events at US News and World Report, and thanks for being with us today for our webinar on Meeting the Reskilling Challenge, a roadmap for the future. In recent years, business leaders, employers, policymakers, and researchers have made the ever more urgent case that reskilling initiatives are essential for the US to maintain a resilient, competitive workforce. Yet, while many leaders agree that a national commitment to reskilling is a necessity, how to achieve this goal largely remains an unsolved challenge. Fortunately, we have with us today a panel of leading workforce experts who are helping to drive the reskilling conversation, and in many cases, spearheading successful initiatives to meet that challenge. We are grateful that they will share their insights and perspectives on the reskilling challenges and opportunities and how we can move forward. Before we get started, just two quick notes. We are capturing video of today's session and we'll be making that available to registrants after the event concludes. We are also simulcasting on the US News and World Report Facebook page. Later in the discussion, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A feature on Zoom on your screen. Our team will review those and the moderator will try to integrate them over the course of the time. Now I am pleased to introduce our panel. You can find their full bios along with details about previous and upcoming virtual conversations at usnews.com/events. With us today are Amanda Cage, President and CEO of the National Fund for Workforce Solutions, Dr. Irma Perez-Johnson, Vice President at AIR, the American Institutes for Research, Paige Shevlin, Director of Policy and National Initiatives at the Markle Foundation, Jenny Sparandara, Head of Global Workforce Initiatives at JP Morgan Chase, and Amanda Winters, Program Director for Post-Secondary Education at the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices. To lead off our discussion, we will now share a short video of one American worker who successfully reskilled and launched himself onto a new career path.
My name is Marcelo Ruas. I live in Fall River, Massachusetts, and I'm a computer programmer at Bristol Community College. I worked as a union carpenter of big residential projects like apartment buildings, but there was too much travel. At construction, your body takes a hit, and my back was hurting all the time. I knew I needed to do something different. I wasn't happy. So I thought about programming because many years ago, I tried and taught myself a little programming and I enjoyed. So I found out that Bristol Community College offered an online associate degree in computer information system with concentration computer programming. I didn't want to go for a bachelor degree because it would take too long and I want to change my career quick. So an associate was the best choice for me. I was able to pay for my classes because I continued working as a carpenter and I took out a loan. I would work like 10-hour days, sometimes commute for like another 3-4 hours and get home tired. And I think I took that as an incentive to study harder, to get over it harder, to change career as quick as I could. And it took me 2.5 years, but I finished. I graduated in December and I was still working as a carpenter. I started sending out my resume and was in May during the official graduation ceremony. I ran into my advisor and she asked me if I was still looking for a job. She told me that someone at IT would be retiring at Bristol Community College. So she told me to apply and I did, and I got the job. Actually, I asked one of my colleagues later, he was on the interview, and he reminded me of something. I was asked about a specific programming task. They asked if I knew how to do it, and I was honest, I said no. But a little later, I had to take a written test and to show my skills, and you got to use a computer. That programming task was a big part of it. In 5 minutes, I searched and learn how to do the task and then answer correctly on the written test. My colleagues said they were blown away by my honesty and my ability to learn programming on the fly. And it left a good impression. A lot of people ask me how I could take classes after working long hours, long commutes. I told them that if I didn't, I would still be doing the job that wasn't making me happy. I remember seeing a single dad raising his kids and working and trying to get a degree. And he said, like, in the process to decide if he would go or not for a degree, he said he thought, oh, I'll be 40 in a few years, but I could be 40 with or without a degree. So choosing the degree was an easy choice for him, and that's how I feel.
And now I will turn things over to my colleague at US News and World Report, Liz Whitehead, an editor with the US News live events team. Liz?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to our terrific panelists for joining us. Marcelo Ruas, of course, represents the ideal of reskilling, giving workers a chance to change course in their careers and employers to get the skilled employees they need. The challenge is how to make Marcelo's story not the exception, but the norm across America. Irma, reskilling has been a buzzword for at least 20 years, but more recently it's become an ever more urgent national priority. Can you briefly sketch out how long-term workforce trends have been compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Liz. I'd be delighted to help kick off our conversation today. Currently, we have about 10 million Americans who have been permanently displaced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in addition to these individuals, we have many more, especially women, as we've all been reading in the news, who have dropped out of the labor market, the labor force, or altogether. In addition, we have many who have lost loved ones, been in the front lines. And as we seek to recover and chart a new path forward after the pandemic, are seriously rethinking sort of their paths in this economy. All of these individuals will need support and guidance to navigate effectively what is fundamentally a disrupted labor market and economy, and identify for themselves, just like Marcelo did, new good career paths, and that will give them opportunities for economic mobility for themselves and their families as we together collectively are also working to rebuild a stronger and more resilient economy. What's important to keep in mind is that it's not just the challenges that we are facing now, like that relate specifically to the pandemic, but there were many challenges that predated the pandemic that, if anything, had become deeper, more broader, and just more severe. In particular, technology and automation were already displacing workers. Those trends, if anything, have accelerated. And preceding the pandemic, we already had many employers struggling to find enough of the skilled workers for livable wage jobs. Sort of because essentially our education to workforce pipeline is broken in this country. We're not generating enough of the individuals and helping them succeed in the post-secondary education and training that is critical to succeed in the jobs that are available today in the future. So I think, from my perspective, those are the most important perspectives. But I think the only thing I would add is that there's also really, really critical equity dimensions here. As we look at the challenges that our country has been facing, again, with matching the labor market supply to the demand side, increasingly we're leaving millions of Americans, primarily individuals of color, in segregated communities, individuals with justice involvement, at a time where we just really need all of the talent, and the skills and the potential that exists in our country. We just can't continue on the path that we have been.
That's a great summary, Irma. And we're gonna, as we move through the discussion, I want to come back to the equity issues and a lot of the points you hit because they're all essential. Amanda, can you pick up on this? And as we were discussing, reskilling has been a buzzword for a long time, but we've failed. And if we're to succeed now going forward, we have to understand what the obstacles have been that we have not surmounted. Can you build on what Irma has been saying and then add your own points?
Yeah, I think Irma really described what is the great disruption. I keep referring to this moment as being sort of the great reshuffling in terms of, you know, workers just being in a different position and reevaluating and trying to figure out how to move forward. And we really need to match this moment. This is a moment in time where we can reorganize and get this right. I think there's a couple of different factors of why we haven't been as successful as we need to be in the past. The first is really around sort of public policy around workforce development. Unlike other industrialized countries, we don't have sort of a real national agenda where we make sort of big, bold goals for what we're trying to accomplish and have the money and the investment that match that. When we look at other industrialized countries, when you look at the top 30 industrialized countries on this earth, the United States has the lowest investment in workforce development other than Mexico. And so that's a real issue. I think our business community, even though workforce development and being able to get the skilled talent they need always rises to the top of their concerns, you know, it always sort of makes the top three. They haven't been able to sort of collectively use their voice to make sure that we are getting that kind of investment and its priority across the board. And then finally, I think what we need to really think about is workers and what they need to be able to succeed. Part of our workforce development system has really focused on that workers are the problem, they're broken. And if they just reskill, everything will work out. But what we really know is that you need a very complex set of systems to support those folks to be successful. And as we talk, and I'm very excited about the panel that you've organized here, we'll see it's not just workers themselves, but all of a variety of actors that need to be involved in creating a more equitable workforce system where we're really using the talent that we have in this country to meet the needs of our economy.
I would like Amanda and then Jenny and Paige to pick up on all these really critical points. Amanda, this idea about consistent investment, that other countries are much better in supporting unemployed workers, supporting reskilling programs in the time frame that are really needed by workers to do the reskilling, the job coaching, all that stuff, which we'll all get into. Can you give your perspective at the National Governors Association about how governors are trying to work together to understand how best to support, as Amanda was saying, the complex infrastructure that you need to support effective reskilling initiatives?
Yeah, I will say the National Governors Association, especially in the Center for Best Practices, it's been a tough year and a half of trying to help states because there are no best practices to deal with what just happened. We all got together and we're saying, what are you doing? What are some of other states trying? Is anything working? What can we do to better serve learners, workers, economic needs during this time? And it was, it has been a struggle, and governors had a lot of conversations together about shared best practices, that there are promising practices that we're seeing emerging about meeting workforce needs during a public health emergency. And I think one of the reasons that some of this has been so difficult to tackle is that no one entity owns this. This is something that is a shared responsibility across public and private sectors, and also across a lot of different federal agencies that feed into programs at the state level. And so there's a lot of attempts to throw everything out there to see what will work. But the connection of that with the learner, the worker at the center is a huge challenge because of the sort of diffuse nature of the solutions, of the initiatives. And that's something that states, I think, are trying to get their arms around right now. What are the best ways in which to harness some of the federal support and also to focus in across human services agencies and workforce agencies and education agencies who are all trying to reach folks like Marcelo, which I have to say, I loved that video, but part of it made me very sad he worked much harder than he should have had to get to the opportunities that we're all working to establish for students. He went through over 2 years of, straight out struggle to balance full-time work and going to school to be able to change his opportunities. And it's amazing, his drive and his dedication got him there. But were there ways that we could have made that easier or more accessible or less stressful, where he had to think about, continue like convincing himself this is worth it. I'm going to do this. It's going to have a great outcome for me. There's ways in which our work can make students like Marcella have better, easier access to be able to transition in ways that are supportive of them in their lives, as well as thinking about the skills and competencies needed to drive the economy. So it's a balance of all of those things, and that makes it a complex and really difficult issue to tackle for states.
Jenny, JP Morgan Chase has been working really aggressively in this area. You have not only got a number of initiatives underway, but you're also trying to rethink how you go from pilot to a program that can be rolled out nationally, or do we need to reverse engineer? And as I think Amanda and Irma would say, there's a lot more need for evidence-based analysis of programs that work. But can you talk a little bit about what Chase's current thinking is about how to tackle these problems effectively after we've gone through this horrible pandemic?
Yeah, happy to share, and I'll just echo other sentiments. It's such a treat to be with you all today and to be in this company. Maybe a little bit of context for why we work on this topic, how we work on this issue. So as was shared in the introduction, I help oversee our workforce initiatives in corporate responsibility here at JP Morgan Chase. And to Liz's point, there's lots of tools that we are fortunate enough to be able to deploy on such a complex issue. So our team deploys philanthropic resources. We also think about our thought leadership voice to the point around, is the private sector showing up on this topic? How are they showing up? How are they additive? We think about also the data that we can harness and make available kind of for the public good through what we know and see through consumer behavior. So it's very multidimensional, and I think we're a microcosm for all of that. I'd also be remiss not to acknowledge that the reason this is part of our community agenda is because we understand how important talent is for us as a company. We have more than 200,000 employees working for us worldwide. When we started kind of really directing ourselves towards the lens of the future of work, which is in 2019, we were articulating both a community investment, $350 million to be deployed around the world to support innovative practices, which I know we're talk a bit about, and I'm lucky to be joined by some of our grantees and partners today on the line. But also to harmonize with what we're doing internally, Liz, to your point, right? We know jobs are changing because our jobs are changing. And kind of two thoughts occur to me that I'll throw out there, and maybe we can kind of chew on them together and come back to them. So one is, the future of work feels like the wrong lens because it is the now of work. And I think, Irma, your point around COVID accelerated trends that were already present, it added complexity. We are, like many, trying to figure out what hybrid work means. And there's a lot to grapple with. And I don't think, and I hope others prove me wrong, that we have solutions that exist at scale. So we have, I think, lots of promising practices that live in little corners of the States or globally. And a big part of what we're trying to do is figure out how can we help aggregate up that learning, use our resources to expand and scale those efforts, and what relationship does that have to policy, which is arguably our greatest scaling mechanism and business practice. So absolutely, that is something that we're grappling with every day. The second thing, which I don't want to seem overly optimistic, but I am genuinely hopeful on, relates to the point around equity. This is a moment where we can be more creative than we've ever been before about what job design looks like, who and how we build pathways into those roles. How can we be working with atypical actors to meet our talent needs and our upskilling opportunities? So, we've been given some of this chaos, but there's an opportunity in it if we're really deliberative to think about how we do build back better. And I know that's kind of been a little bit of a trite talking point, but I genuinely believe there's opportunity to do it, but we have to have discipline around it. We have to be clear on what success would look like. And we're going to need multiple stakeholders. And I think Amanda was making this point to kind of come together around a common cause. So I'm really enthusiastic about the opportunity there, but don't want to understate how complex the challenge is and that we are dealing with some particularly challenging times.
Yeah, and as you said, we keep coming back to equity, which I want to talk about in depth in a minute or two. Paige, the Markle Foundation has lately its Rework America initiative, and it's to go to what Jenny's talking about is that this is such an enormously complex problem. It's not going to be solved unless all the stakeholders are brought together. And you have some very interesting collaborative networks, as does Jason, as everybody on the panel. But can you talk a little bit about what Markle has been trying to accomplish this last year in assembling these networks, and who's engaged in them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the Rework America Alliance was launched by Markle and a whole series of partners last year. And we have now picked some locations that we are planning to deliver capabilities and tools in. We're bringing our partners together. And one of the main things that we're focusing on is identifying jobs that which we call gateway jobs, that are that people have had a history of being able to move into from the sorts of jobs that were lost during the recession, mainly jobs in the service sector, and that are also jobs that will help put them onto a good career path and lead to higher wage jobs in the future. And so we've identified 77 of these gateway jobs across a number of sectors, and are bringing information on those jobs and tools to help people access those jobs, as well as work with employers to open up access to those jobs and to hire based on skills, and to make sure that they understand the ways in which skills are transferable between, say, a job in the service sector and a job in information technology or manufacturing sales. And so, yeah, it's a very large tent effort. The one thing I would say, though, that relates to the conversation that we were having earlier is that where training is needed, that is where, there is a policy failure. We can identify jobs that people can transition to just based on their current skills. But if they need training, and they often do, especially for technical skills, then the lack of access to that is a real big barrier in the system. And, I would agree with Amanda about the example of Marcelo, that it shouldn't have to happen. Number one, that people are, working a full-time job and paying and taking out loans for, an education program. And also, he wouldn't have been able to do that if he had a job that wasn't being a carpenter, right? Because my guess is he was making a decent salary, but someone who, and it's a stable job also, someone who is making less money and they're in a job where they don't control their schedule, how are they supposed to access a training program? And we don't have a training program. We don't really fund training in this country, as Amanda was saying. Our workforce system, even at the height of the last recession, when there were 15 million people unemployed, we trained less than 300,000 people. So then other people can access Pell, but only if you meet the income requirements and if you've had an immediate job loss if you had a recent job loss, I mean, and you were making, over the income thresholds the year before, you often don't qualify for Pell. Plus, people who don't have high school degrees don't qualify for Pell. So there's lots of barriers in the current system, and we need a dedicated funding system for people to actually retrain and reskill so that we can have more examples like the one that you showed.
Well, you raised so many important points here. Irma, this issue, she's talking about that there's been an emphasis now on trying to steer companies away from looking for credentials and degrees towards skills and competencies. But as Paige said, some of these skills need retraining, and their earn and learn programs are great. People get paid as they learn, conventional apprenticeships, internships, and so on, but they're not enough of them. What can we do to make them more widely available? Who have to be the stakeholders? The companies, the federal government, who?
Yeah, that is such a great question, and it just has so many aspects to it, Liz. Let me just start by saying that it's in a way like to meet the moment, we need to try any and all of these strategies. It's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach is unlikely to meet the variety of needs, the variety of circumstances, sort of like we have recent entrants to the labor market who've lost their jobs. We have experienced workers, we have mid-career people. We have, moms who've been in like a particular sector for a long time and now are rethinking kind of what is their best path forward. There are a number of challenges here, and the kind of part of the fundamental issue is that we have kind of our ecosystem or kind of our system of organizations is organized and was designed for a moment of once and done education. That period has long passed. What we need is an infrastructure, an ecosystem that will continuously support individuals as they need to, they find themselves at moments where they need to upskill, reskill, think about, lateral move, whatever. But that requires a really complex infrastructure, bringing together employers, educators, not just at the post-secondary level, but all the way, K-12, career and technical education, not second chance, but like middle skill, like middle life kind of retraining programs. It's a complex ecosystem that needs to come together. And so far in our country, what we have is sort of independent actors working in their individual sectors when we have is a complex optimization problem. We need to bring the employers to the table, understand their skill needs, how they're shifting and changing in real time, recalibrate our educational offerings, retrain our students that are to acquire them, while we also help our existing labor force adapt and change to all of this. So I just want to convey the complexity of what is really needed at this point in time. And to your point, and I think, Jenny and others have alluded to this, we have what my fabulous colleague, Harry Holzer, keeps referring to as these wonderful little gems that we know, have been systematically successful at helping people connect to good jobs and good opportunities. But these programs, when you look at them together, tend to be expensive, sort of costly to set up and maintain, because again, they're tailoring their offerings very closely to an industry, to a sector, working closely with employers, tailoring their training, their services, and putting together all of the supports that individuals need to be successful. It's not just the training, and it's not just technical skills training, but also soft skills, digital skills. It's the complete packet. So that's expensive. Those programs tend to be small, or at least be difficult to scale to serve really large numbers of individuals. And that's the fundamental problem we have. We need to help millions of Americans meet the needs, find pathways in our economy. And for that, we need a systemic response, a strong, robust ecosystem that will attend to the needs of individuals at many different points over their life course. I hope that addresses your question. And again, evidence it is available to help guide, but for the most part, we're not going to find a single shiny solution that will work on a blanket way for everyone. And like, we need to abstract from those programs what are the elements of success, the essential ingredients, and then work to replicate them within our existing institutions like community colleges and career and technical education programs, and integrated employment and training, other kind of elements of the infrastructure that we have, so that systemically we build these elements of success into our ecosystem. But that's the complexity and the level of response that is needed for this moment.
Amanda Cage, considering how complex this all is, if you were trying to prioritize what we needed we have to do everything, but in this current moment, I mean, is it getting states to work with community colleges? What is it that we can do? What can we focus on as the priorities to sort of begin to get on top of this very complex problem?
Yeah, and I think, everyone just keeps pointing out how complex it is. I come with a little bias. I oversee network of local collaboratives around the country. And I truly believe that complex ecosystem that Irma described is unique to localities. Each local community has its own labor market, its own demographics, its own economic development plans. I think that's the closest we get to planning is, you have mayors or governors or somebody locally who's thinking about how to attract business, how to build human capital in their jurisdiction. And I think, as Irma and Jenny has said, we have gems and we have best practices, but I really do think it means that we have to invest at that level so that we can meet the truly tailored demands of all the different kinds of workers and all the different kinds of businesses that we have in our system. We work a lot with small and medium businesses, and each of those small and medium businesses have unique needs. And individually, when you're trying to think about how to develop and upskill your talent, and you're a shop of 18 people or 400 people, it's not the same that you need if you're a large, big box retailer, right? And so we really do have to think about those different needs of those different kinds of employers and those different kinds of workers. I think the biggest thing, and I'll say it over and over and over again, is literally investment. We have not put the dollars, we have not matched the dollars to the need by tenfold, right? Not even close.
And actually, Amanda Cage, if you can just, I think people forget the ROI on this, that this is not invested, this is not money going down the drain. What do we get back from this? We get productive workers who are paying their taxes and building their communities. And so I think that sometimes the discussion gets pushed into the cost without all the benefits. Jenny, can you pick up on some of that? Because Chase is JP Morgan Chase has been doing a lot on, for example, at-risk students and trying to make sure that kids get their high school degree, go on to higher education. Can you talk about the groups that don't have big support systems? We got an audience question right now saying that what about the workers who don't know what their choices are? The importance of coaching, and Paige, I'm going to be coming to you on coaching because Marco's been spectacular on this. But Jenny, can you talk a bit about what JP Morgan Chase has been doing for like the at-risk students and why this is important?
Yeah, absolutely, Liz. And you and I think Amanda were just making a point that I just also want to double down on, which a colleague of mine who leads a big body of learning and talent development work for the firm said to me the other day, which is, and I put this out there as a friendly charge to all of us in the workforce world, like the conversation has to evolve and has to include that commercial mindset. I think there's still a legacy and a little bit of a hangover on like, we should do this because this is good for people, which is absolutely true. But to your point, there is a commercial necessity. There is a economic productivity necessity to getting this right. We know how expensive it is to have high turnover or jobs that dead end. It's not a great business model, and there's been lots written to cover that. So I think there's also just something there about, again, can we evolve the conversation along with the fact that the practices and the context has evolved. So that's just one acknowledgement. But to your point, so I think Irma kind of set me up here well, which is, we know young people in particular, but I would extend this to adults, and Amanda's more expert on this than I am. There isn't a lot that we make available to people consistently to help them understand what is the world of work, what jobs are growing, what skills are related to those jobs, how do you think about how to connect to them, and what decisions might you want to start making, I mean, as early as middle grades, high school, et cetera. So we have put sort of a significant kind of marker out there. We started off by calling it New Skills for Youth. And we ran it as a state competition, which I'm looking over at Amanda W. on, to say states need to evolve their career and technical education systems. We are not doing young people, frankly, we're not doing right by them. So how do we enable more flexibility, more creativity? And that's where we think philanthropic resources belong. Like, let us be an engine to try new things, a bit of R&D support for leaders who are willing to think differently about how these systems come together. Just last year, we kind of re-upped that commitment with another $75 million global commitment. And we're looking at it now really through the lens of localities. So how can we support those local ecosystems and partnerships between school districts, community colleges, traditional higher education, HBCUs? You know, there's a lot of coordination and connectivity that needs to be stoked. And I'll say that to make maybe 2 points. One, I completely agree. We can't have programmatic solutions to such a big problem. We need systemic solutions. And so to me, this is less about, we funded a really interesting program, and more, we helped everybody raise their game. We helped community colleges build course offerings that articulate to degrees that are based on labor market information. Like, we didn't fund a job training program at a community college. We have to do a much bigger, more holistic push on that. And then the second piece I would underscore is that leadership really matters. I think it doesn't have to be consistent leadership in a place. It could be a mayor in one, a school's chancellor in another, a governor in another place. But I do think you need somebody to help galvanize that activity and make sure that you don't have these little pockets of excellence, or frankly, pockets of dysfunction that can't be addressed or connected with others. Liz, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah, no, we think it's an important part of the pipeline.
Amanda Winters, since Jenny called you out, I'll let you go, then I'll go to Paige. Do you want to pick up on some of her points?
Yeah, definitely. And I think all the panelists are making such great points. So I've been scribbling down some notes that I wanted to sort of jump in on. First of all, that information around what pathways are out there. I think that's one of the big opportunities right now. A lot of states, a lot of localities have put a lot of work into gathering up information and putting it on a website and creating a portal. And it's very much an idea of, if we build it, they will use it. So we've checked the box, we've made a thing that now you can use and figure out your life with. So pretty complex. I know when I was back working in a state, when we would have dashboards that we would see that would go up, mostly it was us wonky people who were looking at it, and not necessarily the people that we were trying to target. So there's a disconnect between the information that people need and what we need to do to get it to them. And also building on that, just really sort of basic decision theory. How are people making these decisions? There are a ton of options out there. I mean, there are too many options out there. Not all of them equal. Some of them not going to get you to a place where you're going to have a family sustaining wage. And we as policymakers, and state policymakers especially, really have the obligation to sort some of these opportunities into these, these steps or these places where you can get quality outcomes and you can understand if you're moving in a certain direction, what are the quality opportunities for you? It might not just be one, but at least you can help sort of put a framework of quality assurance and sort of that oversight of what quality means and where we want our workers to be in wages and being able to sustain and grow and have economic mobility. That's really sort of a place that policymakers have to focus. A lot of states are thinking about that. They're doing a lot of great work on that. Like, where are those good jobs? How are we defining good jobs? How do we need to talk to industry about what's coming next that we can start preparing for? But then also just building on some other panelists talking about the local strategies or regional strategies. I think one of the things I quickly learned after coming to the National Governors Association is that not everything is scalable. So you can say, like, this is a really cool thing. This is one of our gems that works. That's not necessarily going to be able to be transplanted somewhere else and have the same sort of outcomes. So it's really getting at those, I think some panelists have referred to them as like ingredients or elements about what makes this a strong model and how can those, framework pieces then be transplanted somewhere else into a unique sort of environment that's serving unique populations and industries and be able to create their own successful strategy. So I think I would just throw in those things around, the need to understand that just putting out information about pathways is not sufficient to getting folks what they need to make those types of life decisions. And then also the regional approach is the richest because it speaks directly to populations within that region and employers within that region, and really can be a retention strategy for regional economic development, so you don't lose your talent and grow businesses and attract businesses. And so there's a lot of spaces in here for the state and state policymakers and governors to lead and take a role in setting the stage for those sorts of regional collaboratives. I will point out we've recently did a series of conversations with the Association for Public and Land Grant Universities and the National League of Cities, thinking about how can we explore regional anchor institutions like universities and local leaders and what they need from the state to support their collaborations around building economic opportunity and also building pathways and leveraging sort of the emerging research that comes out of universities to think about an ecosystem of opportunity for their region. So we're really excited to continue exploring that continuum that goes from the local level all the way up to the state. And then from there, what do we need from the federal government in the way of alignment and support and data and information that can then make the rest of those pieces work. So I'll throw it back to you, Liz.
No, that's great. And we're actually getting a lot of questions. Just a very quick, short one. We were asked, is there any comprehensive list of workforce development groups around the country that somebody could go access? I mean, does the NGA have a list? Does AIR have a list of just, different partners so people can go onto their sites and sort of get their ideas and see what's going on?
I think there's a number of resources. There's the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, NASWA, which certainly serves as a centralized point. There's the National Association of Workforce Boards. Obviously, the National Governors Association brings many of these actors together. The National Skills Coalition. I mean, like many of our organizations are actively involved and partnered. But I would point out to these national associations as, sort of one of the kind of like easiest sort of centralized repositories or contact points to identify the right actors at the local or regional level.
Thank you.
And also throw in there real quickly that you've got your national associations, which are amazing, and they speak to the sort of big W workforce, the WIOA connected programs. But as we're all talking around the panelists, I think we're talking about workforce broadly too. So not just the WIOA programs, but really those skills connected and, you know, getting folks into pathways. So I would flag that too, as you're looking for resources. Some of these speak to specific programs and agency roles, while others are going to more broadly take a look of what does the ecosystem of workforce mean, and how does that connect to federal as well as state and local initiatives.
Thank you. Paige, so Markle has had for a while this wonderful skillful initiative, and we're actually going to put up on usnews.com the story of a woman, Bilo Farmer, who at 59, she'd been managing a domestic violence facility and was burned out and needed a change, and she has transitioned to advanced manufacturing, and she's the machinist one. And she credits a lot of her ability to do that, besides, you know, community college and grants, is Markle helping with, you know, job coaching, you know, just the whole infrastructure around applying for jobs and getting, you know, how to sell yourself. Can you talk about how important this is to provide that kind of support to everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think this issue of helping people find out about what sort of jobs they could access that would be good fit for them based on their skills, what sort of training they might want to do. It's so important. And I think there's two critical factors that people have been talking about. One is the human touch element, and the other one is having the information on returns. So in terms of the, you know, the human touch, we started this through Skillful in Colorado and Indiana, and we are scaling it through the Rework America Alliance, this training program for career coaches. And when we say a career coach, that's anyone who is helping individuals to figure out job paths and training paths. And we train frontline staff on across all different systems. So it's staff who are in the workforce, one-stop job centers that are funded by the federal government, staff that are in community colleges, staff that are advisors in, career counselors in high schools, and staff at local community-based organizations that might be serving particular populations like immigrants and refugees. And all of those frontline staff need the same set of information. They need information about the local labor market and what are the good jobs, and particularly what jobs lead to pathways, right? And will not just end up being a stopping point for the client, but will help them to get more good jobs along the way. So we have a training program that helps them to learn about the local labor market, and also helps them to just learn some kind of core human-centered coaching practices, and also anti-bias training, which is really important because we are working within a system in which there is a lot of bias, and that leads to occupational segregation. If you have coaches and they, unfortunately, sometimes they, see a woman of color and they think, certified nursing assistant, when really, there may be a better job that pays more money that might be a good fit for that person. And so it's really important too that we work with coaches on those biases. So all of that is embedded in our training, and we have been lucky to work with Colorado and Indiana and with former Governor Raimondo in Rhode Island on this, and are planning to scale it more. But I do want to say something about the importance of information too, because coaches need that information in order to share with individuals. And there is all kinds of great evidence that the choices are too confusing, and that having someone who understands the return on programs and can advise clients on that will have a really big impact. Irma has actually done some of that research in the past. And so we need the data on the ROI. And one thing I want to bring up that people, I think sometimes we conflate the information that we have on these kind of local programs and, what people are calling the gems. And I think it's true. We don't have that many, programs that have been through a random, controlled trial, but we know a lot if we actually just look at the data that we have, especially state level data. we know a lot about certificate, degree, programs, that are that lead people to get good jobs. And if we use that information better, we would have more pathways to recommend people toward.
Oh, that's great, Paige. Irma, did you want to make a comment, and then I'll go to our video? Oh, just do your unmute.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I wanted to add a couple of comments relatively quickly on counseling. I just couldn't, couldn't be stronger in my endorsement of the importance of counseling. As Paige alluded to, I've been very fortunate over the course of my career to help design and field and evaluate a number of interventions that have featured important career counseling and job search training and assistance components of counseling in a number of different contexts. And I think one of the key takeaways I've distilled from this work is that counselors can play a particularly strong role because over the course of working with many different individuals, they can abstract what are the important factors that individuals need to be considering in order to be successful in what to them is a very individual experience. You just get unemployed, you have not looked for a job in 20 years, whatever. It's you are living it as a very individual experience. You're overwhelmed by the range of new choice sets and options you can consider. Counselors can help reduce the cognitive burden of that process, as well as keep the decision-making process efficient, tailored, help people avoid important pitfalls in that process. But there are limits to counseling too, and that's something I want to kind of add to this conversation. Paige, you alluded to the human touch element, right? For that reason, counseling tends to become a bottleneck in programs. And I see the integration of technology and technology mediating decision-making supports as a really important way of extending the capability of counseling and increasing access and equity in the context of these services. So I would put that forth as an important frontier for innovation and learning in the context of all of our human services program, not just skill building, because the scale at which we need to provide these supports is so great. And then, sort of the other aspect of it, sort of pertain to, I think it was this issue of equity. So Liz, I'll let you get back to the video, but
no, we're actually going to get into equity right now.
Okay, well, quickly, at the other point, Amanda, you brought up the issue of investment. Yes, investment is needed, but I just keep going back to how much money our country invested during the previous recession, the Great Recession, sort of to help in, help build infrastructure in community colleges through the Strengthen Community Colleges training grants and the TAC grants and other such efforts, but we didn't necessarily learn from them. And I think we need to really pair investments with continuous research, R&D development, and the efforts that will help us just continue to distill lessons and move the field forward. So it was just two points I wanted to make in response to the comments that have been offered so far.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So we're going to, I'm going to ask Michael to run our second and final video. And then Jenny, I'm going to turn to you because it raises issues of equity, upskilling, and we talked about Marcelo Ruas and the tough road he had. Well, this video shows what could be made easier if with the right support. Michael?
Hi, my name is Shayna Cartier. I live in New Orleans. I'm a licensed practical nurse at Oxford Baptist Health System. So I was a medical assistant for a little over 10 years prior to me becoming a licensed practical nurse, which my long-term goal was to always become a nurse, a registered nurse. So juggling between working full-time and going to school was very difficult for me. I tried it on my own. I just wasn't, successful with working full-time and trying to go to school full-time with getting my career going. So Ochsner, they had a wonderful first-time apprenticeship program that allowed medical assistants to transition over to licensed practical nurse while still staying employed at the same time. So the LPN program was at North Shore Technical Community College, what was through a grant funded program with the federal government that was completely free to me, and Ochsner helped pick up the remaining of the cost as well. So in return of participating in this apprenticeship program, I had to commit to 3 years of working for Ochsner, which was totally not a problem for me because I had been working for Ochsner over 11 years at this point. So I had no desire to leave or want to go anywhere. So that was an easy yes. So Ochsner definitely helped me expand in my career. I was promoted immediately after completing the licensed practical nurse program to become a supervisor in my department, which was an honor. I have a little bit over 20 something medical assistants that work underneath me that I'm able to help guide and mentor and show them, you know, that anything is possible. So it was definitely an honor. It means a lot to get my LPN associate's degree. I was the first one in my family to ever graduate from college. I'm not done yet. I want to continue my career growth. My goal is to become a registered nurse. There is discussion that Ochsner will be having a registered nurse program where a licensed practical nurse to transition over to become registered nurses. And once that happens, I'll definitely be applying.
So there is a lot to unpack in Shayna's story. So she was fortunate in a lot of ways. She had said she had a very supportive husband and kids. Program was paid for. Ochsner will take time off during work during the week to complete elements of her program. So when we talk about pathways, we talk about helping for people. First, Jenny, it's a lot for you to address, but can you talk about how Chase sees helping workers upskill and the value of it to sort of keep them in? I mean, the costs are lower, right? If you keep an employee and you train them up. Can you go to that? And then we'll talk about this idea of how are we going to help underserved communities and give them these kinds of opportunities more frequently. So go ahead.
Yeah, happy to, and I agree. There's so much in Shayna's story there that I'd love to jump in on. So just a couple of things that I heard listening to that, and that really resonate with the work that we're pursuing here. So I think it was said earlier, but all companies are not created the same way in this, and I do think for us, we're a relatively large employer that sometimes, I'll talk to a colleague at Walmart and I'll say, whoa, like that's a scope and scale that, is unbelievable. But I just want to reaffirm that it's really helpful for us to talk with peers and understand, what are you doing? And sometimes we can create those spaces ourselves. Other times we can find each other through other networks we're participating in. I just want to shout out the work that Amanda Cage does, because she helps stoke those partnerships for smaller and medium-sized businesses many times. So there's something there I want to acknowledge. And that's one of the ways that we got connected with the idea of doing apprenticeships ourselves. We had been, I think, kind of tracking that model and thinking about, does that fit for us and the kind of jobs that we have here at the company? And to your point, Liz, that can be for new employees, but it can also be for existing employees. And particularly for us, when we have employees who are moving from non-tech jobs to tech jobs, those kind of earn and learn models are really interesting to us. So we have some programs within the firm, particularly for technologists, where we think about, if you've been a great kind of operations employee or call center employee, and you're interested in continuing to grow your career here, and we're thinking about where is the kind of puck moving in terms of long-term job sustainability. Obvious, everybody I think at this point is aligned around the fact that digital skills, analytical skills are really important. So that's just one point I'll acknowledge. But the second point I wanted to make is back to this idea of, rather than thinking programmatically, how can we think systemically about employer practices? And I know I'm eager to hear what others have to say on this. for us, there's been something there around also how do we modernize our kind of tuition reimbursement policies, our educational policies. So the firm has been looking at that carefully, looking at what peers are doing and thinking about, again, how do we take something and really look at it from the user experience, from the learner experience? How can we support a worker on their trajectory? The last thing maybe I'll put out there, and I'm curious what others have to add, is that there's a tremendous amount of upskilling and training that we do at our company, and I'm sure this is true at others, but we don't always call it that. So how can we also make those skills more portable and clearer? Because there's a tremendous amount we do. I mean, we're a regulated industry, so we do a lot of training all the time, but it's the kind of thing that makes our people attractive, both internally and externally. And I think we'd love for everybody's next great move to be here at the company, but sometimes that opportunity is going to be outside. So how could they leave with also the kind of ability, that kind of currency that comes with what it is that they've learned here on the job, both through our formal training mechanisms, but then through some of the less formal training mechanisms? And I'm curious what others think. I don't think we have a great answer to that at the moment, but it's something that I think when we talk about upskilling or reskilling at scale is a big opportunity.
Amanda Cage, can you pick up on some of Jenny's points? And also I want to talk about equity a bit more. Access to these programs. I mean, if you're, Shayna is lucky. She has a supportive husband, as I said, and family, but what if you're a single parent? What if you're in a low wage job? What are we doing to support these people? What do we need to do to support these people so they have these options to step up?
Yeah, so I think, to Jenny's point, employer practices is incredibly important, right? As we get into an economy like we see right now, companies really have to think about not just buying outside talent, but building their own. And I've seen more and more companies thinking about that, especially around issues of equity, right? Thinking about their own internal pipelines, how they're able to get people from entry-level positions to higher level positions. And I know you asked this question of Irma earlier, but oftentimes like sort of false degree requirements get in the way, right? In internal companies. We worked on this advancing workforce equity report that was funded by JP Chase, where we looked at what some of the disparities were for labor market outcomes, especially for communities of color and workers of color. And really, one of the major factors was what we refer to as those social determinants of work, right? How access to childcare, access to transportation, where you live and what's available to you in your neighborhood. And those are real conditions. And I think when we talk about systems and changing systems, it often includes thinking through the external dynamics of people's lives. What you described as like a single mother in a low wage job trying to get on a career track, that's like 75% of people who are in workforce development programs, right? And we take incredibly talented, incredibly driven people, and we put obstacle after obstacle after obstacle in front of them, right? And we're losing out on that talent. Right. So I think it's incumbent for us to think about all of those sort of things that we don't tend to think of as workforce development, but they're workforce development adjacent. And we work with more and more employers who are thinking about, oh my gosh, what are the transportation systems that our workers have to deal with? What are the childcare restraints our workers have to deal with? And I think that's an important element. And then I want to go back to Paige's comment about occupational segregation. It is real. And there are mental models in this country about what kind of people can do what kind of work. And they are deeply ingrained in our economy. We have trapped, especially Black women, Latinas in low wage industries and occupations. And we have to rectify that. We really just have to focus, as we're thinking about upskilling and training, we really have to focus on the racial equity aspects of it as we build programs and as we sustain programs.
There's so many points there. We only have a few minutes left, but one thing that infrastructure. So if infrastructure ever passes Congress, that's a ton of hundreds of millions of dollars at least of jobs, but infrastructure has traditionally been very male. So how do we get women into some of these fields? How do we retrain people who are hiring to consider women? And one of the things that struck me about Shayna's story, she was stuck in she was happy, but as a medical assistant, as soon as she got her degree, she was supervising 20 people. That talent was always there. Marcelo had this native ability in programming that was hidden until he got the opportunity. So we're not doing anybody favors by putting these programs. They're doing us the favor, right? So Amanda Winters, what is do you see any of the states doing any programs that are specifically targeting these low-wage workers and trying to remove some of these obstacles to advancement?
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of states doing a lot of really interesting and creative things to try to advance equity. It's certainly high on the minds of governors across the aisle, and we're seeing it come in different levers. So utilizing the GEAR funds, the governor's emergency education relief funds from the CARES Act, also using, just broadly some CARES Act dollars, looking ahead to other rescue funds that might flow into the state. Governors are thinking about where to place that and where there's flexibility to speak directly to equity. A couple examples I'll pull out is Rhode Island. We're working with them on a project around work-based learning, and they've utilized some of their Perkins 5 flexible funds to supply equity grants. So to help districts think creatively about access to opportunity and learning for populations who have not traditionally been well served by our systems. So really thinking about how can we incentivize some creativity around this, but also point to the state of Alabama. We're working with them on quite a few issues right now across work-based learning and workforce development. And they've made equity a front and center piece of the work that they're doing. And that's translating into them talking about ability to benefit, talking about short-term credentialing, career pathways that lead to family sustaining wages. So equity is weaving into a lot of these conversations in some impactful ways. So what are some of the levers that we have to open up opportunity? And I would say one of the continuing challenges is that some of these career pathways that we develop in states and that lead to family sustaining wages, the first couple rungs on the ladder are not the goal jobs. So for instance, the video we watched, moving into a licensed practical nurse position, below that, medical assistant, CNAs, all these early and entry level direct care spaces, which are mostly women of color, who move into these caring professions. They are undervalued, and we get them onto the pathway, and then whose job is it to make sure they have the opportunities to continue on that pathway? We laid it out on paper. How can we help them move within their life and their work through the pathway that we laid out beyond that entry pathway job? I think that ties over to some stuff that Paige was talking about, that the Markle Foundation is working on. I think that's really key, is not just getting people on these pathways, but understanding how that ecosystem supports them in moving on to those goal jobs where they can be overseeing, their team of 20 now from that entry level position. So I think that disconnect there is going to speak more closely to the equity of opportunity issue. Is maybe we've gotten them in the door, but then we've left them to figure out the rest themselves, rather than saying, this is the next step, let's get you there, let's fit this into your life and make sure that you can advance. And then also, I'll just throw out, a lot of these places, this occupational segregation, it leads to us devaluing the work of some of these different occupational sectors. For instance, early childhood educators, direct care workforce, those who are serving mostly by these women of color who are great professionals, and yet the wage doesn't match up with the type of skill that they're bringing to the job. So that has to be a continued conversation as well. The raising of the bar of wage opportunity that comes in these professions that we have great need for, but continuously undervalue.
That's
Can I
terrific.
just jump in on this? Because I think this is really important when we think of upskilling and reskilling and workforce development, which is we've had this story in this country that it's okay if we have a low quality job, as long as we build a career ladder for you to get out of it. And that is just, we have to get beyond that. Every job needs to be, even entry-level jobs need to be good jobs, because that's what empowers people. It gives them the space and it gives them the time to be able to take advantage of those additional educational opportunities. So I just want to emphasize that, because people really get stuck. They get stuck at those entry-level jobs. They swirl because they're doing lots of things that they need to do to make ends meet. If we let them make ends meet from the beginning, we could capitalize on that talent early on.
Yeah, that was the point I
Paige?
really wanted to make as well, that we have to address the floor in order to actually address equity. And we know this from our work, there are not enough gateway jobs for everybody to access them. There's simply not enough good jobs. And so we have to raise the floor of current jobs. And without doing that, we'll continue to have occupational segregation, and it will primarily impact people of color because of the structural racism in the system.
That's great. Irma, can you make our final comments?
Yeah, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I think I'm just sort of so delighted to hear just the level of alignment that is surfacing. I wanted to add, sort of two small points, kind of that build on Amanda's and Paige's most recent comments, and it's like, and relates to the ecosystem we need to be developing. It's like we have a system that is reactive. It provides assistance to people when they lose a job, but again, we're moving to an economy, to a society where people have to be constantly like reevaluating what additional skills I need to get, where I need to, where do I need to upskill, where do I need to pivot. That requires a more nimble and like broad-based infrastructure to provide proactive, forward-looking support to our whole population. So I just want to put a plug in for that concept, that as we think about the infrastructure that we're building in states, in regions, in localities across the whole nation, what we need is the kind of infrastructure that will be available to provide career navigation and planning and development support to all of our citizens, to all of our population on an ongoing lifetime basis. And again, bringing all the right talent to the table. The second aspect, and I just wanted to go back to your question, Liz, about women in construction and kind of these issues of kind of cognitive maps, or like what kind of occupations or fields are appropriate for me. When it comes to infrastructure, the infrastructure proposal that is currently being debated is not just about construction, it's about technology, broadband, sort of like medical, like investments, sort of like, and generally we have issues of gender equity, gender and like racial and socioeconomic gaps in all of these areas. Sort of women tend to shy away from construction fields, from technology fields, from STEM fields. Minorities participate at much lower rates. Anyway, so the equity gaps pervade all of these areas where we need to cultivate more talent. But there's an issue that people themselves may not see themselves in those occupations. So that element of kind of reinforcing that these are fields you can go into, others like you have been successful, and providing the support for people to sort of be confident that they can successfully enter and thrive in those fields is really important. So it's not just an issue of training, it's also the kind of cognitive maps and just meeting individuals where they are and providing the support that will help them make a successful transition into these fields. But what a great conversation.
This conversation will continue. To meet the reskilling challenge, it's going to take the combined efforts and inspiration of all the key stakeholders, many of whom have been represented by our outstanding panelists today. Hopefully we'll meet the challenge and help create millions of more success stories like Marcelo Ruas and Shayna Cordier, while ensuring our country remains well positioned to be competitive in the future. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.